The acrid smell of burning metal and synthetic compounds saturated the air. Corporal Brian Hayes squinted through the haze, his eyes stinging from both sweat and smoke. The landscape of Vega 9 was unrecognizable now. What had once been rolling blue meadows now resembled a hellscape of craters and twisted debris. The 23rd Marine Combat Division had been reduced to scattered individuals, himself included. "Command, this is Firefly 7. Brian spoke into his comm unit. "Requesting extraction coordinates." "Over." Static crackled in response before a distant voice broke through. "Firefly 7. Maintain heading 045. Extraction Point Charlie is operative. All personnel ordered immediate withdrawal." "Repeat, immediate withdrawal." Brian adjusted his battle-scarred helmet and checked his ammunition. 3 clips left. Not great if he encountered a DRNID patrol. The alien invaders had pushed the combined human-Lyrian forces back across 3 sectors in the last week alone. This world would soon be lost. Movement caught his eye. His tactical scanner flickered with interference. Typical near DRNID energy weapons. But something was definitely moving among the rubble 30 meters ahead. Brian raised his pulse rifle, finger hovering over the trigger. But what emerged wasn't the chitinous form of a DRNID soldier. It was a Lyrian. The alien ally was partially trapped beneath fallen debris, her luminescent blood, a pale blue that almost seemed to glow, seeping across the ground. The Lyrians had been humanity's saviors when the DRNID first appeared in Earth's solar system. Their advanced technology and fighting prowess had turned the tide of early battles. Brian approached cautiously. The Lyrian's silver-blue skin was ashen, her typically regal features contorted in pain. She was clearly a warrior, from the sleek armor to the ceremonial markings on her face. Her eyes, large, without pupils, and a startling violet, locked onto his. "Human," she managed, her voice melodic even in distress. Her English was perfect, as it was for most Lyrian military personnel. "Continue your evacuation. I cannot move." Brian knelt beside her. "What happened?" "Spinal injury." She gestured to her lower body, completely immobile beneath the debris. "My squad was ambushed. I ordered them to leave me." Brian's training echoed in his mind. In hostile territory withdrawal, leave behind any immobile personnel to ensure maximum survival rate. It was cold but practical. In this war, practicality often meant the difference between life and death. "I'm Corporal Brian Hayes, Earth Marine Corps," he said, already calculating how to move the debris. "I am Kira Nalari, Royal Sentinel of the Lyrian 4th Phalanx." Her rank ghost of a smile crossed Kira's face. "Not unlike your path, I suspect. Your hands, they have known work beyond weapons." Brian was surprised by her perception. "I was studying architecture before the war. Wanted to build things, not destroy them. The universe has strange designs for us all," Kira said softly. Their conversation was cut short by the unmistakable clicking sounds of a DRNID patrol. Brian pressed back into the shadows, one hand covering Kira's mouth. Her body tensed in his arms. 3 DRNID soldiers moved into view, their armored exoskeletons gleaming dully in the fading light. They communicated through a series of clicks and whirs, a language neither humans nor Lyrians had fully deciphered despite years of warfare. Brian slowly reached for his sidearm, knowing his position was compromised if they turned in his direction. Kira's hand moved to his, stopping him. "Wait," she whispered. Their thermal vision has difficulty distinguishing between background radiation and living beings in areas recently hit by plasma weapons. "Stay still." Brian froze, barely breathing as the patrol passed within meters of their hiding spot. After what felt like an eternity, the DRNID moved on. "How did you know that?" Brian asked once it was safe to speak. "I specialized in xenobiology before becoming a sentinel. Knowledge is as valuable as strength in warfare." They continued their journey, Brian becoming increasingly aware of their dwindling supplies and his own fatigue. Kira, despite her stoic demeanor, was clearly in pain, though she never complained. "There," she suddenly said, pointing to a half-destroyed structure that had once been a transport depot. "That building, I sense Lyrian technology within. How can you tell? All our technology contains trace elements of melvanite, a mineral from our homeworld. Lyrians can sense its presence. It's difficult to explain to humans. Brian adjusted course toward the building. Right now, I'll take any advantage we can get. The depot was a maze of collapsed corridors and exposed wiring. Following Kira's directions, they made their way deeper into the structure until they reached a sealed door. This is a medical bay, Kira explained. There may be supplies inside, perhaps even emergency transport. Brian set Kira down gently against a wall and examined the door. It's locked. Any ideas? Place my hand on the scanner. Brian helped position her palm against the security panel. The door hummed briefly before sliding open, revealing a surprisingly intact medical facility. Jackpot, Brian whispered, helping Kira inside before securing the door behind them. The room was dominated by a cylindrical chamber at its center, a sleek, pod-like structure with glowing blue lines tracing its surface. Various medical equipment surrounded it, most labeled in the flowing script of the Lyrian language. What is this place? Brian asked, helping Kira toward a nearby examination table. Her expression had changed, becoming tense and almost reverential. This is a healing chamber. It is sacred technology. Can I help you? Fix your spine. Kira's eyes seemed to darken. Yes, but there are complications. This technology is not meant to be used lightly and never with non-Lyrians present. I'm not exactly planning to take notes, Brian said, checking the perimeter of the room for security. You don't understand. Kira's voice had taken on an edge of urgency. The chamber works by rewriting cellular structures at their core. It requires deep genetic synchronization. Brian turned back to her. Meaning, for a Lyrian of my rank, the chamber is calibrated to my genetic signature. But my injuries are severe. The chamber would need to draw additional genetic material to complete the healing. So what's the problem? Take some of my blood or whatever you need. Kira's gaze was intense. The process is much more comprehensive than that. If you were to donate genetic material for my healing, it would create a permanent bond between us, a biological and potentially mental connection that cannot be severed. Brian stared at the chamber, the implications slowly sinking in. You mean we'd be linked? Permanently? Yes. In Lyrian culture, such bonding is sacred, performed only between life partners or in the most dire military situations between squadron members. Never with another species. It has never been attempted. Before Brian could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Dust rained from the ceiling as the structure groaned around them. They're sweeping the area, Brian said, checking his weapon. We're out of time. Another blast, closer this time. The lights flickered. Leave me, Kira said firmly. This is not your burden. You've already done more than any would expect. Brian looked at the wounded warrior, then at the chamber, then back at the door that wouldn't hold against a determined ID assault. Is there any other way to heal? No, not without proper medical facilities, which are light years from here. Brian made his decision. Then we used the chamber. Tell me what to do. Brian, she said, using his first name for the first time, you don't understand what you're offering. This will change you. Us. Forever. Another explosion, even closer. The ceiling cracked. I understand enough, Brian replied. I'm not leaving you behind, and we're not going to die here. So let's do this. Kira's expression shifted between disbelief and something deeper, a recognition of sacrifice that transcended species. Finally, she nodded. Help me to the chamber. Brian carried her to the cylindrical pod. Following her instructions, he operated the ancient controls, causing the chamber to open with a hiss of escaping air. Inside was a form-fitting gel-like substance that glowed with an inner light. Place me inside, then you must join me, Kira instructed. The bonding requires physical contact throughout the process. Brian gently laid her in the chamber, watching as her body sank slightly into the luminescent gel. Taking a deep breath, he climbed in alongside her, their bodies pressed together in the confined space. The chamber sealed around them. Whatever happens, Kira whispered, her face inches from his, Know that your courage honors both our kinds." The chamber activated with a low hum. The gel around them began to pulse with light, growing warmer and seeming to flow into rather than around their bodies. Brian felt a strange sensation, as if his very cells were being pulled apart and reassembled. Then came the connection, sudden and overwhelming. He could feel Kira's consciousness brushing against his own, her memories flowing into him like water. He saw glimpses of her home world, vast cities of crystal and light, training grounds where young Lyrians learned combat arts, quiet moments of study in great libraries. In return, he knew she was seeing Earth, the Rocky Mountains where he'd grown up, his university days poring over architectural designs, the day the DRNID first appeared in Earth's skies. The process intensified. Pain shot through Brian's spine. Kira's pain, he realized, followed by the strange sensation of tissue regenerating. He could feel her body healing, cells multiplying and restructuring, and somehow knew that elements of his own DNA were being incorporated into the process. Just as the sensation became almost unbearable, it began to fade. The chamber's light dimmed, and the gel receded. The pod opened with a hydraulic hiss. Brian emerged first, his senses heightened to an astonishing degree. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds clearer. He helped Kira from the chamber, and to his amazement, she stood on her own, her legs once again strong and functional. "It worked," he breathed. Kira looked at her hands, then at Brian. "Yes, but the changes are more extensive than just my spine." Brian was about to ask what she meant when the building shook violently. The DRNID had found them. Without a word, they both moved toward the exit, a new sense of coordination guiding their movements. Somehow, Brian knew exactly what Kira was planning to do before she did it, just as she anticipated his actions. "Is this part of the bonding?" he asked as they navigated the collapsing corridors. "Yes," Kira confirmed. "Our neural patterns have harmonized. It will become more pronounced with time." They emerged from the depot to find themselves surrounded by DRNID forces, at least a dozen soldiers with weapons trained on them. Brian raised his rifle, knowing they were outnumbered. Then something extraordinary happened. As the first DRNID fired, both Brian and Kira moved in perfect synchronization. He felt a surge of energy through his body, a reflexive enhancement that seemed to borrow from Lyrian physiology. His movements became faster, more precise. Beside him, Kira executed combat maneuvers with a fluidity that incorporated distinctly human adaptability. Together, they were something neither human nor Lyrian, a perfect fusion of both species' strengths. The battle that followed was unlike anything Brian had experienced. He and Kira fought as a single entity, compensating for each other's weaknesses and amplifying strengths. When Brian's ammunition ran low, Kira passed him her energy weapon without a word or glance. She simply knew he needed it. When a DRNID soldier flanked Kira, Brian was already there, neutralizing the threat before she had fully registered it. Their combined fighting style bewildered the enemy, who had never encountered such perfect coordination between different species. In minutes, the DRNID patrol was defeated. Brian and Kira stood amid the aftermath, both breathing hard but exhilarated by their newfound abilities. "That was," Brian began. "Unprecedented," Kira finished. Then she suddenly doubled over, clutching her abdomen. Brian was at her side instantly. "What's wrong? Are you injured?" "No," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and disbelief. "It's something else, something forming within me." Brian could feel it too through their connection, a tiny spark of life, impossibly forming within Kira's body. A hybrid life, neither fully human nor Lyrian. Are you pregnant?" Kira confirmed, straightening up slowly. "The genetic bonding has created something new, a possibility that has never existed before." Before they could process this revelation, the sound of approaching aircraft filled the air. But these weren't DRNID ships. They were human and Lyrian vessels, finally breaking through the enemy lines for extraction. As the ships landed, troops poured out, securing the area. Among them was a tall Lyrian in elaborate armor, clearly a high-ranking officer. He approached Kira with obvious recognition. "Sentinel Nalari," he said, then paused as he noted her healed condition and the strange energy signature emanating from both her and Brian. "What have you done?" "Commander Valen," Kira addressed him formally. "We utilized the healing chamber under extreme circumstances." The commander's gaze shifted to Brian, then back to Kira. "With a human? This is unprecedented." A human officer joined them, Colonel Margaret Winters of Earth's Joint Command. "Corporal Hayes, we received your distress signal hours ago. When you missed the extraction point, we feared the worst. The situation required adaptation, Colonel," Brian replied, aware that neither commanding officer could possibly understand what had transpired. Before further explanations could be offered, a massive explosion lit up the horizon. The DRANID were launching a counteroffensive. "We need to move out," Colonel Winters ordered. "Full tactical retreat from this sector." As they boarded the evacuation vessels, Brian and Kira were separated. He to a human medical transport, she to a Lyrian command ship. The distance created an almost physical pain, their newly formed bond stretching uncomfortably between them. Through the bond, Brian could sense Kira's distress mirroring his own, and beneath that, the tiny spark of life they had inadvertently created pulsing with potential. 3 weeks passed in a blur of debriefings, medical examinations, and isolation. Brian was kept in a secure facility at the Joint Human-Lyrian headquarters on the Moon Titan. Scientists and military personnel alike were fascinated by the changes in his physiology. Enhanced reflexes, heightened senses, and most intriguingly, cellular structures that showed Lyrian characteristics. But the most difficult aspect was the separation from Kira. Their bond remained, a constant awareness of each other despite the distance. But it was like trying to hear someone speaking from another room, present but muffled. Finally, after endless questioning and tests, Brian was summoned to a high-level meeting. He entered a large conference room to find representatives from both human and Lyrian leadership present. And there, at the far end of the table, was Kira. The sight of her sent a jolt through their bond. She looked different. There was a subtle glow to her skin, and her posture had changed slightly to accommodate the small life growing within her. She offered a small nod, her eyes communicating volumes that words couldn't express. Admiral Zhao of the Earth Defense Force spoke first. "Corporal Hayes, Sentinel Nalari, thank you for your patience during this investigation. What occurred between you is, to put it mildly, unprecedented." Commander Valen, the Lyrian officer from the extraction, continued. "The healing chamber technology has been sacred to our people for millennia. Its use with a non-Lyrian should have been impossible, perhaps catastrophic. Instead, interjected Dr. Eleanor Whitman, the lead human scientist, it has created something remarkable. The hybrid cellular structures in both subjects show extreme resilience and adaptability. And the fetus," she paused, looking at Kira with barely contained scientific excitement. "It appears viable. The first ever human Lyrian child. More than viable," added a Lyrian scientist named Talon. "Its genetic structure suggests capabilities beyond either of our species. Enhanced regenerative abilities, cognitive potential off our established charts, and energy manipulation capacities we cannot yet quantify." Admiral Zhao leaned forward. "Which brings us to the central question. What does this mean for our war effort?" Brian tensed. The military implications hadn't been his concern, but he should have expected this angle. "Sir, with respect, Kira and I, and our child, are not weapons to be deployed." "Of course not," the Admiral replied smoothly. "But you must understand the position we're in. The DRNID have pushed us back in 3 systems. We're losing this war. Until you two engage that patrol," Commander Valen added. "The combat footage from your neural implants is extraordinary. You fought as one entity with capabilities neither species possesses individually." Kira spoke for the first time, her voice strong. "The bonding was a sacred act, undertaken for survival. I will not allow our child to become a military experiment." A tense silence fell over the room, broken by the arrival of a junior officer who whispered urgently to Admiral Zhao. The Admiral's expression shifted from annoyance to shock. "It appears this discussion must be accelerated," he announced. "We've just received word that the DRNID fleet has withdrawn from the Vegas system entirely." Murmurs of surprise filled the room. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, "They've sent a communication request. They wish to parley." Commander Valen stood abruptly. "The DRNID do not negotiate. In 15 years of conflict, they have never once attempted diplomatic contact. Until now," Dr. Whitman said thoughtfully, her gaze moving between Brian and Kira. "Something has changed." Brian felt a strange certainty through his bond with Kira. "They know about us," he said. "Somehow they know what happened." The next few days were a whirlwind of diplomatic preparations. The DRNID had requested that Brian and Kira be present at the negotiations, a condition that caused considerable debate among both human and Lyrian leadership. Eventually, necessity overrode caution. If there was a chance to end the devastating war, it had to be pursued. The meeting was arranged on a neutral space station in unclaimed territory. Brian and Kira were escorted by an honor guard from both species, though the formality did little to ease their apprehension. "Can you sense anything from them?" Brian asked Kira through their bond as they approached the meeting chamber. Their ability to communicate mentally had strengthened over the weeks. "Only caution and curiosity," Kira replied silently. Her hand rested protectively over her abdomen, where their child continued to develop at an accelerated rate. The DRNID delegation was already present when they entered, tall, chitinous beings with multiple limbs and compound eyes that reflected light in disconcerting patterns. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate markings on its exoskeleton, stepped forward. To everyone's surprise, it spoke in perfect English. "We have observed the aberration," it said, its mandibles clicking softly between words. "The joining of incompatible genomes. The creation of that which should not be." Admiral Zhao tensed beside Brian. "If you've come to threaten..." The DRNID leader raised a limb. "You misunderstand. We have fought your kind because you were separate, flawed, limited by biological isolation." "What does that mean?" Commander Valen demanded. "Our species has evolved beyond never existed before, and helping our peoples navigate this new relationship." Brian took her hand, feeling the familiar surge of their bond. "I never imagined when I found you on that battlefield that we'd end up here. That saving one life would lead to all of this." "In the ancient texts of my people, there's a saying," Kira said softly. "From a single seed grows the forest that shelters all. Your choice to save me, despite everything logical and tactical suggesting otherwise, has created a future none could have foreseen." 3 months later, in a specially designed medical facility that combined human and Lyrian technologies, Kira gave birth to their daughter. The child was extraordinary, with skin that shimmered between human tones and Lyrian silver blue, eyes of vibrant violet with human pupils, and a presence that seemed to fill the room with energy. They named her Lyra, after both a human constellation and a Lyrian word meaning new beginning. As Brian held his daughter for the first time, he felt something remarkable through their three-way bond. Not just his and Kira's consciousness, but now Lyra's as well, a bright point of light connecting them all. Word of Lyra's birth spread quickly, becoming a symbol of the new peace. Other humans and Lyrians, inspired by Brian and Kira's example, began exploring their own forms of connection. Not always biological bonding, but cultural exchange, technological sharing, and deep cooperation that would have been unimaginable before. The DRNID, true to their word, withdrew to agreed-upon boundaries, maintaining observation outposts, but no longer pursuing conquest. Their communications suggested a profound shift in their understanding of evolutionary paths. 1 year after Lyra's birth, a ceremony was held to inaugurate the first Joint Species Academy, an institution dedicated to exploring the potential of human-Lyrian cooperation in all fields. Brian and Kira, now official liaisons between their governments, stood on the podium with Lyra in Kira's arms. Looking out at the assembled crowd, humans and Lyrians intermixed, their former divisions increasingly meaningless. Brian reflected on the chain of events that had led to this moment. A simple choice on a battlefield, made against all military logic and self-preservation instinct, had altered the course of 3 civilizations. Admiral Zhao, now the head of interspecies defense, approached them after the ceremony. "Your daughter is thriving," he observed, smiling at Lyra, who watched him with unervingly intelligent eyes. "She is," Kira agreed, "and she won't be alone for long. The medical team has identified 7 other human Lyrian pairs who are compatible for bonding. 2 are already expecting children. A new generation," the Admiral mused. "One that will see possibilities we cannot even imagine." As they left the ceremony, Brian carried Lyra while holding Kira's hand. Their bond hummed between them, a constant reminder of their connection. "When I found you that day," Brian said quietly, "everyone else would have left you behind, including myself, if I'd followed orders." Kira's violet eyes met his. "And yet you didn't." One decision, made with compassion rather than calculation, changed everything. Lyra reached out, her tiny hand touching Brian's cheek. Through their bond, he felt not just his daughter's love, but a glimpse of something vast and profound. A future where the boundaries between species faded, where connection replaced conflict, where the impossible became merely the next step in evolution. "When one person dares to save those abandoned by others," Kira said, echoing Brian's thoughts, "they save not just a life, but open the door to hope for entire worlds." As they walked together into the future they had unwittingly created, Brian reflected that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism weren't grand battles or strategic victories, but simply refusing to walk away when compassion called for courage.